That really helps with the jet lag, doesn't it? Cool. All right. I think we're ready to start. Fantastic. This is SYM01 with a very long title. I'm not going to try to read out because I wrote it, and it's still long. Louder. Okay, we'll do it louder, no problem. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's a fantastic turnout. A few things before we start. If I can change my slide here. First of all, I need to thank the Diamond sponsors and all the people that have made this possible. It's fantastic. It's lovely to be here. Lovely to be able to give these talks and have the discussion that hopefully follows on from this. This symposium is slightly off from the other ones. We are going to try to have 8-minute talks with 5 minutes of questions and then a 2-minute changeover. We're doing that because we're hoping that there's quite a number of topics that can be discussed that would engage people. And we also have, besides the normal channels, the Zoom channel, the verbal questioning, of course, the Oxford abstracts, there is actually a Google Doc as well. There's a link there where you can go on and there will be the talks. There will be a section there to ask questions as well. We will try to monitor that as best as we can. And in fact, the Google Doc, but I think all of it, hopefully we can use that for later engagement if possible. If people are interested, if there are good questions, we might pick up on those. Might result in some further conversations, webinars, or discussions instigated by us if that follows, which would be really, really cool. So that was the intro, and I probably forgot half of the things that I meant to say. There's a very nice list here. But I think in terms of time, we'll do the first talk, which very arrogantly of me is myself. I am the moderator, Steen Dupont, and my co-moderator is Yoder there. The reason why I'm going first is because I'm trying to line up the discussion points and the framework of the talks that come after this. So if I start, I don't know, can I just go into the first presentation? Yeah, okay. So, fantastic. Hello, my name is Steen Dupont. I'm doing a talk on behalf of NHM and a program at NHM. So on behalf of my team, I am a program manager at the Natural History Museum running a program called RECODE, which is short for Rethinking Collections Data Ecosystems. And it's quite old, well, not old, it's been going for a while. We are currently, sorry, let's start at the beginning. We're building a CMS with a supplier that is a sector leader in document management. If you have any questions about why the hell we're doing that, just come up to me afterwards. We can have a chat about that. We're currently at the point where we're delivering most of the foundational elements of the system, and we'll then move on to future roadmaps and lives and looking at more complex functionality around complex UIs, dynamic tree viewers, extended functionality, search functionality, data validation, all these things, they are coming. There are things that we are looking at. The program itself is rather complex, has 6 work streams here if we disregard some of the other work streams, and there's a huge overlap on that. Just a reminder, this is going to be death by Venn. So this is the first one. It'll follow. So there's a number of work streams that mingle together in what is the backbone, which is sprint-based. Communication with stakeholders, with the supplier, delivery, testing, and last, something called good enoughism, which I will circle back to in the end. But the point of the talk is actually to outline the framework and the space that we were hoping to discuss within this number of talks, which is the intersection between 3 different sectors. So we have the bio-geodiversity community, we have the institutions with their collections management and systems, and we have the suppliers. They have an intersection there that overlaps and doesn't overlap. They each have, well, they're all critical, we know that. They each have goals, visions, needs, and dependencies. If we take that just a bit higher up, we can divide them into three and we can create a Venn diagram, which is what I'm trying to do. We can look at the purpose, the drivers, and the constraints of those. I'm going to skim through these very fast, and then we're going to come back to them after the slide. So if we look at the bio-geo community, and anybody can disagree with this, I made these slides, these are some of the thoughts that I have, so they're there to be challenged, right? But if you're looking at the community, we're looking at purpose around collaboration and attribution, we're looking at drivers like standards, but we're also looking at constraints around data accessibility. A lot of institutions, a lot of the providers of data don't have the capacity to share, or their data is just not appropriate for the community. So there is a huge constraint there. If we look at the technology suppliers, there is, of course, a purpose in market value. They want to create a good product. They want to sell that product. They want to be trustworthy, growth, make a mark. That's what that driver, of course, is customer needs. If you want to make a good product, if you want to be a good provider, you need to answer to the customer's needs. But again, at the same time, you have the constraints which are around the product sustainability. You have your own security, the compliance, the integrity of your own product, which needs to be upheld regardless of what the demands are. So there is a constraint there as well. And again, looking at the institutions, you have something that mirrors the community to some extent. You have research, conservation, and use and sharing of your collections. But at the same time, you have the institutional needs, which might not mirror the community needs. And then, of course, constraints-wise, institutions have things like regulation and compliance that they need to think about. They might have to retain all the messy data just because they have to. And that, of course, creates a problem if you're looking at legacy data and sharing that with the community and making that ready. So my point was, let's take those three, let's mash them together in an event, and let's just look at what we see in that intersection. And we can then pick up on those or reflect on those as we go through the talks. So if you're looking at the purpose between those three, I'm just going to read out the big blocky parts, because if not, I'm going to run out of time very quickly. So when we're looking at the purpose, there is the ideal of a common framework to be able to work within across the community, the institutions, and the suppliers. If we look at the drivers, we can look at common tools. So where we have data standards, institutional needs, and customer needs, we can look at tools within that intersection that help drive or help that driver. If we're looking at constraints, I always find the constraints the most interesting. We'll come back to that. We'll come back to why I find them interesting. But if we look at this, so from my perspective, working for a big institution, but working with a supplier who knows nothing about the community, by the way, but is doing a great job, but there's a steep learning curve there. So understanding that, I think some of the constraints we see within that intersection is the supplier clarity. It's understanding where the constraints of an institution meets the constraints of a community, where the data standards in a community reflects on the purpose and the drivers of the institution, because you can't deliver to both. You can, but you can't do it optimally. So you need to understand where that intersection lies, what that means to both your customers as a supplier. And that is a difficult message, because as you can see, we are different fields. Mash it all together, and you, of course, get the intersection, where you get the purpose, the driver, and the constraints of that intersection itself, which is around a common framework, common tools, and a clarity in communication and the roadmaps that you want. So if you use that, and then we go back to good enoughism, I'm doing well on time here. It's good. So the reason why I talk about constraints as being so important is when we do our work, when everything's flying everywhere and we don't understand the complexity, or the complexity is too big, the constraints help narrow down to what exactly you need to deliver and what fits within what you're trying to deliver. So if you take the constraints of our intersection, which is data accessibility, compliance and regulation, and product sustainability, if you build anything that fits within that triangle, if your framework fits within that triangle, if your tools fit within that triangle in the middle, then at its core, it's not perfect, it's not the best solution, but it works. And there's an understanding between those three fields that you are trying to deliver to. So if you start there, if the objective is to start there and move from there, I think you get a better transition. Whereas if you start outside and say, my needs are here, and everybody else we need to figure out how that fits with everybody else, then you're already at a discord, and there's already an issue with the communication. So the question is finding that golden spot. within there. And I think that's some of the things that we work hard with, but also presents problems, of course. So in terms of recode, so when we're building, we do have a number of constraints and challenges. We've got legacy data galore. We will have that for centuries to come, to be honest. We won't be finishing our digitization. We'll keep getting data. We'll keep discovering collectors who've collected data. And each of those collectors have their data in one format. They've got their countries that don't exist. They've got their standards. So building a system that enforces a date format or enforces something else is fine moving forward, but it leaves everything else behind. And the institutions can't do that because they have their regulations and their compliance. They need to have that, and they're historic. So they want to keep Rhodesia. They want to keep the dates as they are for historical purposes. But how do you then apply quality assurance and quality control on that if the system can't enforce those things? We, of course, are also dealing on, tons of other are dealing with user comfort. We're coming from one system to another, data integrity, quality versus the experience that the users have. How much can you enforce on the users? How much can you say, well, it's fine that you've been working like this for 20 years, but you actually have to work like this because it's better. It's better for the data quality, it's better for the interoperability, it's better for the regulations and the loans and everything else that you need to do with an institution. And the user sitting there, well, why can't we just do it the way we used to do it? Because it was a lot easier. Well, because we need to move forward. And then, of course, I think anybody who's worked with big institutions or trying to develop systems for big institutions has probably encountered siloed thinking, governance that is partly broken, people not wanting to make decisions. There's a paralysis on what should we do about our audit trail? Do we want to keep it? Should it be in the system? Should it be in a different system? Is it only supposed to be queryable by one person, or should it be allowed for, I mean, these things bubble up, and there needs to be a very, very strict, to some extent, governance structure to make that work. Time, perfect. So from our perspective, moving forward, we're looking at a future roadmap now, trying to leverage all the functionality within our platform, looking at existing community needs, and leveraging the AI. So that brings me to the end of my talk, but brings me to the question that I just wanted to ask. Because legacy data for us is a big problem, because we are trying to cater for it. So the question is, what do you do about this mountain of stuff that needs to fit into this rabbit hole that you're chasing? How do you make that work? So how do we deal with legacy data when working with a new system or trying to enforce new and better ways of working? That is my question, so I would leave it over to you. If nobody picks up on it, I might talk more. Thank you. Is there time for questions?
Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah, works. Okay, we have time for one question. And please go to the microphone.
It's fine. It can be after.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Good.
Go for it.
Hi. So just very quickly, it seems like a standards also based question. We get asked many times about data completeness. Is this record complete? Are you actually sharing everything you know about this thing or not? And it seems like a related question, because what you're really saying is, what's the provenance of this data? And is there a way in which, it seems a little challenging, could we declare it legacy, like a flag, and say, is legacy? So, this is the best you're going to get. No amount of AI or other things is going to add more data. This is what we have.
So you could agree that we can declare legacy, or we declare that missing fields have been filled out by AI. So these have been with a certainty of 98%. This comes from a pool of samples that were all collected in Zimbabwe or something else by the same collector at the same time. So it is 98% certain that if there's an agreement that we can improve legacy data and that survives in the community, but the institutions keeps their own ground truth, or is the question that the ground truth is just there for the institutions and actually so yeah, that is the exact question, but how do you deal with that? I'm not sure we're going to solve it in 30 seconds. But yeah, thank you, Debs. Okay.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody. And now we are switching to a virtual presentation by Andrew Bentley from Kansas. And yeah, so we are making the switch.
Everyone, my name is Andy Bentley, and I'm here representing the Specified Collections Consortium at the Biodiversity Institute, University of Kansas. Sorry that I was unable to join you in person for this session, and I hope you're having a great meeting so far. I've changed my title slightly and would like to talk to you today about sustainable approaches to digitization, data publishing, and data integration using specified collections management software. So let's start by telling you a little bit about what Specify is. Specify is open source software that allows for the efficient computerization and the management of biological collections and the publishing of specimen information online for stakeholder use. It consists of a highly customizable forms-based interface, powerful querying tools, robust report designer for printed output, and the handling of all collections transactions. The aims of the project are to advance biological collections computing, communication, and collaboration through the software and the services that we provide. The software is of limited cost. We've recently moved from an NSF free model, no cost to the end user, to a community funded model, but the software is still open source and available to all. You can scan the QR code at the bottom there to take you to the Specify software website, which will give you more information. Specify is an extensive, truly relational data model of over 200 tables and 2,000 fields used to express the fields and relationships necessary to manage the complexity of the various natural history disciplines and the functions associated with managing a collection. There are multiple ways to set up the necessary Specify 6 or Specify 7 infrastructure, from standalone systems for small collections to complex server-based infrastructures for large institutions. Specify also has cloud-based hosting options to alleviate the bioinformatic and infrastructure requirements otherwise placed on institutions. Specify is fully multi-user capable with a full security and authority package to control use and functionality preferences. The history of Specify is that it began as a DOS-based project called Muse, which lasted almost 10 years. In 1996, we embarked on the Specify journey, with our Specify 6 Java client being released with multiple versions and increased functionality and features over a period of almost 20 years. In 2015, we released our Specify 7 web-based platform that provided much-needed collaborative and portability support, while also increasing feature richness. All new development is being concentrated in Specify 7, with the aim of complete replacement of Specify 6 in the near future. This history involves 30 years of NSF support with 20 years of NSF funding for Specify, a new proposal every 2 to 3 years, and about $240,000 in direct costs per year. Shortly thereafter, in 2017, we began our path to sustainability with a change in our business model. Specify had two goals in mind in its drive to sustainability. We had to find a revenue model and an organizational model that was fit for purpose, and we were pretty sure that we wanted to do it within the context of our current university setting, which afforded us certain benefits. There are numerous models out there which we evaluated. Pay for what you want voluntary payments, freemium where you charge for premium versions, set payments where everyone pays the same, pay for extra services and support, tiered pricing based on usage or size, and membership pricing with an annual membership fee. An evaluation of all options set us off on our journey, meeting with multiple deans, center directors, entrepreneurial faculty, and others. We asked lots of questions. This is what we want to do. What would your recommendations be? We looked at numerous organizational model options, B corporations, L3Cs, benefit corporations, and more. Perspectives varied widely, but we finally settled on a university structure already in place called the Industrial Affiliation Program. Every university has one, and they are usually set up by business and engineering centers. In the end, we also decided to go with the membership pricing model. So we initiated discussions with KU about the Industrial Affiliation Program, and the Specified Collections Consortium, or SCC, was officially created in July of 2018. It was designed around the aforementioned institutional membership model with 5 tiers of membership. Each institution initiates a membership agreement that governs their membership and participation, while the consortium has bylaws that form the legal basis of these agreements. The membership levels operate on a per-collection sliding scale with increasing benefits attached to increased buy-in to the model, but largely independent of institutional collection size. These include access to user and technical support, customization costs, early access to releases, collaborative development opportunities, and seats on the board and advisory councils. Grace memberships are determined on a case-by-case basis to allow for involvement of financially strapped organizations. SCC governance is handled by a board of members together with science and technical advisory committees that meet frequently to help shape development goals and priorities. The SCC provides access to the open source CMS software and all releases of Specify 6 and 7. All new development is being focused on Specify 7 with 1 or 2 major releases every year and minor update releases every 3 to 4 months. The major benefit of membership in the SCC is access to technical help desk support, as well as data migration, initial and ongoing database setup and configuration assistance, including form customization and label and report design services. Specify currently has 396 collections at 151 institutions in 21 countries as part of the consortium, and this number continues to grow as more interest is shown by new institutions, organizations, and consortia. This is a breakdown of members by membership tier. Our support for database hosting cloud services is growing as more institutions relinquish their interest in trying to run their own data centers and servers. We now have 79 collections in our Specify Cloud service, with data centers in Europe, North America, the Middle East, and South America. We have added 40 to 50 collections this year, including international collections consortia across Switzerland, Denmark, and South Africa, as well as other countrywide federal agencies such as CSIRO in Australia and CSIC in Spain. From a financials perspective, we're doing well. We've seen an 18% average growth in membership revenue from financial year 21 to 23, with a range of 13 to 24% per year. We had a large increase in expenses in financial year 23 due to the rehiring of 3 programmers. In 2024, revenue was $494,000. This does not include the major grant award by the Swiss for GeoSpecify. This budget covers operating expenses, Specify staff salaries, and the hiring of half-time student workers who assist with testing, programming, and help desk support. We now have 3 full-time professional software engineers, a membership specialist, and technical services coordinator, as well as part-time employees like me. One of the biggest advantages of being on a university campus inside a museum is that we can draw on a pool of computer science and software engineering students who are eager to learn modern development practices and to have an impact even as undergraduates on a large software project. Several have told us that they learn more from working with us about software engineering than they do in their formal classes. We also have a number of our clients contributing to the consortium in various ways. Some are contributing to development by writing or editing code, while others are developing specific modules to extend Specify's capabilities in various realms like paleontology. We also recently entered into a multi-year grant-funded agreement with our Swiss partners to develop an extension of our data model and new features and capabilities to support geological collections. So our move away from a dependency on one primary financial stakeholder in NSF has had several subtle but profound effects. First, we need to figure out who would be the new stakeholders, and with a membership organization, it became the collections institutions, the ones who are paying. This includes KU, who has been a substantial underwriter of Specify activities for 30 years. We value our users and have always been a bottom-up open source effort by people in the trenches. We invest a lot of effort in technical support services and communications for our member institutions who have direct access and influence on what we do, and we are highly transparent about our priorities and timelines. In finding value, we obviously sustain ourselves economically if we produce products that members perceive to have value. We have proved that after 6 years, we are thriving as a member organization. This business model is a lot more stable and predictable, and we are grateful to the members, especially our insightful, future-looking founding partners who have made recurring investment in the project. So what about the future? For Specify, so far so good. We're still growing and international interest has been surprisingly high. National museums in Denmark, Germany, South Africa, Brazil, Switzerland, Greece, and Canada either have or are expressing interest. With interest from large federal agencies with networks of collections, we may have to adapt again to changing markets, but our hearts and souls will always remain with research collections. However, our future in supporting research collections very much depends on the overall health and research vigor of biological collections and the value that society places on them. They are evolving with genetic and culture collections supplanting or extending more traditional methods and preparations. But those of us who think about the future of the whole enterprise of biological diversity and the role of collections have to think hard and fast about the business collections are in. To have any hope of finding stable sustainability, it is not enough to serve ourselves. We need to know what value we have to stakeholders and what business we're in. With that in mind, our future relies heavily on supporting large-scale initiatives like the extended specimen and data integration in general, through the development of tools and services that allow for the flow of collections data to these major infrastructures in a seamless and coordinated fashion. We're developing and designing on many fronts in this endeavor through effective digitization tools and integration initiatives, and there are other talks at this meeting by Specify staff that will highlight a number of these. If I have time, though, I'd like to talk about one of these, the Specify network, that is a progressive step in the direction of data integration from a CMS. In Specify, each record has a Specify network cluster that facilitates viewing your record as it appears in the major aggregators, as well as using some data quality metrics published by these aggregators to assist in data cleanup. Taxon names can be checked against various authorities to ensure up-to-date taxonomic representation, while also allowing the viewing of distribution of other records held by the aggregator to check accuracy of both spatial and taxonomic scope. This is our first foray into data integration from within the CMS, and there is lots more to come. And with that, I will take any questions. Thank you.
We had one question to discuss, which was how. There we go. So the question is, how do we as collectors and bioinformatics community sustain critical CMS infrastructure for the long term through collaboration, innovation, and integration? We pay for it. Yeah. Should we pay for it? Yeah. Okay.
That's the big question.
There you go.
Hi, thank you. I would like to know how common is it in production setting to have both Specify 6 and Specify 7 used against the same database? And what's the pattern? How is it used?
It is fairly common. There are a lot of collections that are using both 6 and 7. You know, at the moment, we have yet to port over all of the features across from Specify 6 to Specify 7. So there is a need to have Specify 6 running in the background in order for some of those functions to work. But the overall plan is that eventually Specify 6 will drop away and everybody will move to 7. But at the moment, there are a number of collections who have some people who prefer to use 6 and some people who prefer to use 7 in the same collection. The functionality is very similar across the two. And so it's very easy to run the two together and simply be able to connect to the same database either through 6 or 7.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andy. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Evgeniy from EarthCape.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Evgeniy Meyke, and Untitled is also here, co-author of the talk and the partner. So we are a small, new-ish company from Finland, specializing in collection management software development. And we will talk about our experience of working with large institution deployments. So far, since we're relatively new, we only have few partners that we worked with. We started fairly long time ago. The development itself may date back to 20 years from now, but the company appeared about 12 years ago, and we mostly worked with research groups originally, mostly in ecology, where the data is most complex, and then shifted the focus more towards collection management software. So that experience helped. Collection management systems are actually not that difficult. They are pretty boring kind of back office things that basically need to allow you to do your kind of daily job and not at least interfere with it. Hopefully help you do that. And what is difficult is the collection management itself. And often this is where the difficult parts are. It could be anything from legacy data, as Steen has just pointed. We can touch on that. It can be anything dealing with cleanup operations, again, dealing with legacy data or not. It could be, deployment timelines, resources, all kinds of needs from different teams within the institution. But that's more on the kind of technical side of things. There's also another side of things. So we can have very diverse team dynamics, how they work, how they interact. There's politics often, especially in the larger institutions where you can have teams that prefer to work in different ways. Sometimes they're not used to work in a combined sort of environment, in a shared environment. They before using any large CMS, they used to work in their own systems within the institution. Well, I scratched the emotions, but it turned out to be that it's also a very important part because people that work in the museums, they actually live their lives there. Often it's not just a job. It's often actually not paid well. And so they dedicate themselves and they want to, so their work is actually keeps being pleasant. So we don't want the CMS to actually ruin that. We actually want to help that. So we have to take into account pretty much everything. And, about the bird. So Steen's symposium title actually took the fly out of the title, right? So, okay, here's the bird. So yes, flexibility and choice is what I think are kind of the cornerstones of those complex environments that I described. It could be, so there are like several things. So on one hand, we want to keep the sort of integrity between the different teams, different collections, and also between the institutions. But on the other hand, we want to provide that flexibility. So what we decided to do is that our data model at the sort of table level is fixed. So we rarely, we do if there's a need, but we rarely need to add another table, so to speak, into the system. But the extensibility at the field level is important, especially also between collections. We have to be able to allow different teams to provide their own requirements for the set of fields. And we need UI to be able to handle that variety of hiding things and showing things that are relevant to particular teams. So our UI is very context aware, depending on who is logged in, which team they belong to, and in this case, we provide different views essentially into the system, and they're very targeting their collection types essentially at the basic level. And of course, we also want to provide a set of specialized tools so that people have to leave the CMS as rarely as possible. So all the kind of other additional things they might be rather doing within CMS, we try to provide those. So the backend is, again, there's a choice. So the users can choose the database engine, what they want to run it on. And we structure the data model around this kind of major points. One kind of strategic decision that was taken is to have a very clear separation between a collection object and the occurrence or observation. So since we started from ecology, from the research, this is where mostly the observational data lives. This is often there's no collections even. So basically we wanted to be able to handle both types of data, and that the system can handle not only biological objects with observations, sort of the wild part of the object, but also objects without the wild part, objects that are not biological necessarily. So any other collection types, culture, for instance, are also possible to configure in the system. On the other hand, we can also handle observations without collection objects attached. And the good example is complex environments, like for instance in Kew Gardens, where they have really a lot of different collection types, like seed bank, fungarium, arts illustrations, and so on. They are able to have collection objects, in each of those collections with different teams handling those objects, but have a single occurrence object that actually links those collection objects, which means that it provides an opportunity to basically have a single point of name change, locality, information, geography cleanup, and so on. That affects all of the teams that work with those collection objects attached to that occurrence. So this is again the kind of an overview of the data types that are in the system. Of course, the system needs to do the transactions. That's kind of the first major kind of extra tool that needs to be as a part of the CMS. So the approach is that we have this kind of a flexible system that allows you to build this kind of a very targeted output. And the way we do it is that there's a configuration layer that is basically created for each institution. So in fact, we're providing a custom solution, but we still have a single code base. So basically there's a single code base, single out-of-the-box product, but each institution and each collection gets configured, and configuration is basically an XML that is stored inside the database of the institution. So this is just an example of these configuration records that live in a system. They may structure according to different applications that actually connects to a database. It could be a web client. It will be in the future a mobile client as well, or desktop clients, and they have their own application sort of models, what we call, or configuration layers that are stored in a database. And it's just, as I said, it's just XML, where you define pretty much everything starting from custom fields that are extending the entity tables to validation rules, localization, and so on. So there's a very kind of complex configuration tool that's built into the system. And what we also would like to happen is that the users are able to configure the system also on their side, or continue to configure after we do the initial one. So you can configure anything starting from navigation to views and to list views or tables or detail views. So I'll just quickly go through different configuration options. You can have also, you're able to configure appearance rules that allow you to highlight different things depending on the data. For instance, highlight catalog number if it's a type and things like that. Yes. Yeah, this example of validation rules. And since I'm actually running out of time, I'll just browse through different configuration options and just switch to the tools. So in the result, we have a system that, as you can see, for instance, this example from Q configuration. So you can see that they configured the navigation panel according to their collections. And we're able to provide this kind of basically they are defining how they want the views to look, and this is how the system works. As I said, the result is again pretty boring. It's Yeah, it's that. And there's not really much way around it. I mean, we can hide things in pop-up forms and buttons, but actually users in the end, when they work with it, they still prefer to have an overview of things as broad as possible. So, but again, like for instance, the economical botany from Q prefers to have that interface. The others prefer the other one. The last bit I want to emphasize is that since the system is so configurable and configurable by the users, we need to be able to test it. So basically, there's also includes the testing functionality that is able to, you can run the scripts and test how the system actually performs. I think I'll probably stop at that. I haven't gone to the tools, sorry about that. There's all kinds of built-in tools, like starting from mapping, to report designers, dashboard creation, kind of GBIF publisher, and the last but not least is the important way we interact with the customers is basically through frequent releases and testing cycles that we maintain private repo on GitHub for them. And last big thanks to Q that has been actually very productive in the last 3 years interacting with us. Helping us essentially build a better system. You can scan the QR code and watch their video that they created for themselves initially, but it's actually very usable for the rest as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Ev. I'm so happy to hear you're on an emotional journey as well. We don't have time for the discussion point. Yeah. It is in the Google Sheet. You can feed into it. But just one quick question for Ev, if you want. If anybody has anything, burning desire to tell him that you're emotional? No? Okay. In that case, we will swiftly move on to Arctus, I believe. Is that Debbie? No, it's Erica.
It's me.
Sorry. Hello, Erica.
I have a PDF. It's problematic. Sorry. Good thing we have extra transition time. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Erica Krimmel. I'm here representing my colleagues from the Arctos Collections Management Solution. So we're talking about who's flying the plane anyway, like navigating multi-stakeholder CMS development demands. And I want to thank Steen and Yoder for organizing this session because I think it's a really fun take on collection management systems. So I just want to start off by elephant in the room, like our expectations for a collections management system have really increased. I've just said it's not rocket science, but in some ways it's starting to feel like collections managers or the funders are expecting it to become rocket science. I don't know if any of us really want that, but you can see on the slide here, this is 2 specimens in Arctos, and this is all of the types of information that Arctos is managing or connecting to about these specimens. So it's pretty complex. We're no longer looking at our collections management systems to just be digital versions of a collections ledger. For Arctos, which I'm talking kind of broadly, but through the lens of Arctos in this talk, so Arctos has been on this evolution as a CMS for the past 30 years or so. And Arctos is both a technical product, so it's a database, it has interfaces. It's also a community. Almost 60 institutions with over 330 collections, hundreds of people involved, and those people are making all of the decisions about the technical product. So when you have a self-governed community with really diverse stakeholders, hundreds of people, that kind of requires some structure. And so as much as Arctos has been developing data infrastructure over the past few decades, they've also been developing community infrastructure over the past few decades. This diagram is the current community structure for Arctos. And what that does is it really the structure helps the community make decisions as a group. You kind of need that in order to all decide about something that's shared. One thing that's a little bit different about Arctos versus some other collections management systems is that it's not only the product that's shared, it's the data. So for instance, your agent records might be shared between all collections in Arctos. So it's really like a next level of decision making. And because complexity is inherent to biological and biodiversity and geodiversity specimens, it's also inherent to Arctos. For example, if you're thinking about people, Arctos kind of from the get-go in the late 90s, early 2000s, treated agents or organizations and people as entities that have relationships with each other and with objects across collections, across institutions. That was kind of like technically groundbreaking in the late 90s. It really just reflected the reality that people are not name strings. And recently, in the past year or two, Arctos has done kind of another revamp of how it manages agents' information. So we're going to use that as a little bit of a use case here. But one of the things that involved is shown in the slide kind of captures the breadth of what Arctos has done recently for agents. So things like linking out to ORCID and Wikidata identifiers and trying to place an agent in the context of the broader information ecosystem. And what we've learned is that making decisions about complex systems is really hard, and it takes so much time, and there's just not enough people to make those decisions. So with the Arctos community, one thing that we see is that we have these community processes, and they're nice. We don't actually have enough time to like follow them. You know, it's nice on paper, but in reality, a lot of CMS teams and their CMS users and a lot of collections staff are skeleton teams. So, you know, I think everyone in this room knows that. Arctos currently has one full-time staff person, so that's, you know, that's cool. And this is not like a problem that CMSs feel uniquely, right? Like this is at the collections level, the institution level, the museum level. So it's hard to make decisions about complex systems when you don't have time to deeply engage with the decisions. And for the Arctos community, that's kind of exacerbated because people have full-time jobs. They are a collections manager for an institution, and then they're also participating in Arctos as a governing member. So here's where I want to get like briefly optimistic. I'm going to take us back down, don't worry. But so I see a lot of potential for us to benefit from the perspective of the field of human-centered design here. So sometimes when we have frustration, it can be helpful to fall back on community norms, and it can be helpful to have those norms be kind of formalized. So human-centered design is really just a solution-making theory that centers the individual user's needs over the system's needs. So it's basically involving humans at every stage of the process. It's pretty, it's not complicated, but it's easier said than done. And so what's shown on the slide here is just an example of one of the human design principles that the United States Digital Services team uses is fail early, fail fast, fail small, know that iteration is learning. So for instance, you might go through this process of discover, design, deliver, measure multiple times because you're working through that process. But sometimes for a user, an overburdened collection staff member, they need a little help understanding what we're even doing here. We need to pull back the curtain. So I'll give you like a little black box retrospective for Arctos. So for example, when we did this revamp of agents, the Arctos community spent a lot of time in this discovery phase, figuring out user needs related to agents. Everybody felt really good about that. Then stuff got implemented, and we went through several iterations of design, deliver, measure. And it was actually like from a design perspective, a very successful process. From a user's perspective, it was really confusing when you log into your collections management system and the way you manage agent data is different than yesterday. So that's where like having the meta layer of like, what are we even doing as a community? Like what processes are we following would be helpful. So how do we get from here to there? Okay, now I'm gonna take us back down. We just need more people, you know, we need more money to hire more people and more roles. So that should be pretty easy to solve. We also need roles that are new to us. Like in analogous industries, those roles are kind of interstitial. They might be, like Steen is a program manager. We need more people like that. We need product managers. We need business analysts, user experience analysts. We need those people that are working interstitially between the development teams and the experts, which are collections experts, research experts, curators. And those types of roles, what they do is they make everybody's time more efficient, right? You as a collections manager get to be an expert in your needs instead of also being an expert in what your IT or development team is doing. And then why? Like, why do we need more people? Well, okay, back optimistic. So I think if we had more people in more roles we could translate the needs of collections into global development priorities. So we could all stop doing the same thing in a bunch of different places. Every time I come to Spanish Tadwig, it's like, wow, 4 people are all doing that. And then in 5 years, no one will be. I think we could give development teams time to collaborate. I think that's something that's hugely undervalued. We have all these developers that we're expecting the world of, and they don't even have time to do their main priorities, much less collaborate. And then I think we could maybe like take a breath, pause, think big picture every now and then. To give you an example of number 2, so Arctos has done all this work with agents. We're really well positioned to do something like integrate better with Bionomia. It's not going to happen. Bionomia development team, Arctos development team are each one person. They don't have time to get together and figure out how to collaborate. If you had someone in an interstitial role that could do the legwork on user needs, could kind of arrange what the priorities were, might be a different story. So, okay, I did it with time, kind of. So I want to end with this discussion question. And to frame this discussion question, I'd also like to just end with the thought that we can talk all we want about technical progress and the digital extended specimen and grand new ideas, but unless we're centering the people involved, none of that is going to happen. So my take-home message is we all need to value ourselves as people and our colleagues as people. And to that extent, we think that it's a good idea to think about what role you might want to add to your collections management system. So that is the question I'll pose to the room and to the Google Doc. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, go back to the question. I think it is on. Yeah, there. So, questions general to Erica, or of course.
And I would be curious if people have thoughts they want to add to the Google Doc asynchronously. Please do.
This one won't reach.
Great talk, Erica. So one thing that would be helpful from like a program management perspective would be to know what the skill sets are for these product owners. I actually have a position like this in my staff. They don't really have the full skill set to do this work. So it requires a lot of technical expertise, but also kind of the social people engagement, requirements gathering expertise. So one thing the community might be able to do would be to help define what the requirements for this kind of role would be.
I think that's such a good point, Lindsay. Thank you. Yeah, it's hard to hire someone when you don't know what that person should look like, which is a problem for us also.
So in the Symbiota Support Hub, we've had pretty good success with having some designated positions that have a little bit of technical expertise and a little bit of collections expertise. And that's been a critical linkage between like the developers and the folks on the ground who are like, we need a new field that does this. And you're like, well, let's explore like another way that we can work through that. And so I think that, and also just having a like a very responsive help desk has been really useful. Like people will have this much time to pay attention to a data problem, then they'll report that problem. And then if you don't get an email for 2 weeks, like you forget about the problem and never fix it. But if there are people there who are designated to helping you and fixing your problem even for you at some times, then you're able to overcome those challenges much quicker.
That's a great point, Katie. And for Arctos, Teresa Mayfield-Meyer had been doing something similar also successfully.
Hi, I'm from Royal Botanic Gardens, Yale. So we are currently going through this process with the Earthcape software. So we have a dedicated team to communicate it with the software developer and the expertise. So we meet frequently, so we have a plan, definite plan. Definitely you need somebody to communicate between the stakeholders across the institute and the software developers. Thank you.
Alan. I'm just making you stand up. You're very comfortable there.
So I'm also from Q. Nice talk. Completely agree with you in program manager and business analyst, really important. The other side of that is you need to devote enough staff time to engage properly and embed those people coming inside with these exercises into your museum. So you just don't get them in and leave them to it. It's as you said, it's a very human thing. It's not necessarily all technical. It's about that embodiment of people doing the same thing, and that evolves over time. So what you do at the beginning of the project might not be at the end. So post-project, that will change. You will need probably in-house staff living with the system and configuring with the developer. So it moves as well as stay still, but it's a very human and social thing, I think.
Can I ask a question? So we're talking a lot about what we're individually doing from a systems perspective with our institutions or the systems that we are building. Is something along the lines of a community BA and community DA that synthesizes the knowledge that the different systems and the different institutions have gathered over the year and present that at a TADWIC or yearly as a joint up vision? So not exposing anything, but talking about, well, this has been done, this has happened, these are the requirements that have been analyzed. I mean, that sort of brings together that intersection from my point of view, instead of having those siloed views from at Q we do, this is not a take on you, but at here we do this and here we do that, but having that overarching view.
So just as one concrete example, I was reminded that at least for one particular kind of role, this biodiversity informatics manager or bio-curator, what you might like to call them, we did have a working group, and at IDIG Bio there is, and people have used it, this sort of what does a biodiversity informatics manager do? If I want to hire one, what characteristics do I need to be looking for? And those documents exist, but now they're like, I don't know, 6 years old or something like that, Eric, I think. So redoing that, but at this higher level question where you're asking about more different kinds of roles, but having that as a community conversation at TADWIC and Spinach so that we are sharing our needs and what we're learning together rather than sort of independently figuring them out over and over again. Yes, Erica?
I hate taking time from the one that's getting the most questions here, so, but we will move. Thank you so much, Erica. And we will shift over to Matthew, which is a recording.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of my co-presenters, Debbie and Jose, it's great to be presenting virtually at TADWIG 2024 in Japan. So we were all tasked to give a question or to bring up a question within this symposia, and we'll start with that. Biodiversity is complicated. Does it follow that applications that interface with our knowledge about it will therefore be complicated too? So this is a really open-ended question, but we hope this talk will give you some context that we might use to explore the answers or the nature of this question. So of course, we're going to be talking about TaxonWorks in terms of the context. This is open source software that's been in development by the Species File Group for over 12 years. To put that into a bit of context, that's one little bit of complexity within the broader scheme of sort of biodiversity informatics. Here we've got a figure from the Recode project that sort of places us into context. So given this context, we want to give you a sort of set of socio-technical takes on broader CMS development issues. To do that, we're going to discuss 5 things we've heard during the course of TaxonWorks development. For each of these, we're going to highlight the opportunities they bring us with respect to strengthening our broader communities, and also sort of touch on the red flags being raised that may require some more focused attention. So to start off with, we often get folks coming to us and they'll say something like, so we're looking for a place with names and synonyms and images, and maybe we have some maps from the literature and specimens, and we got references and translated PDFs and matrices and images and sound, and they'll go on for a little while and then they'll say something like, does TaxonWorks do that? Really what they're looking for is a way to bridge the complexity of their physical world in a sort of digital sense, and this is a real challenge. So when we hear that, when we hear somebody coming and asking us, can TaxonWorks do that, there's a real opportunity. TaxonWorks does do a lot, so we can use that to cultivate excitement. We can also use it to sort of touch upon the complexity that we're talking about in this very talk. Red flags wise, we really need to listen to the needs of our users in our community, right? We need to be able to manage their expectations. Can we really offer them what they want to get out of things? Can we sort of express what the pros and cons of diving into something like TaxonWorks will actually look like? If folks are using TaxonWorks for a little while, we'll often hear something like, when will it be done? And this might be in context of a feature request that's coming down the pipeline or some documentation that needs to be written. Here, the opportunity is to really be transparent and really to try to provide that person who's bringing that question some agency, because maybe they can actually help that get done. This also raises the red flag that maybe there's some mismatched expectations going on. Maybe there's some open-ended or evolving goals. So when somebody says, well, why isn't my text purple and bold, and why is it just in plain font? Maybe we were not quite getting the important nature of what needed to be done communicated, right? Maybe we've answered the question in one way, according to the developers, but they're thinking of answering it in another way. Another thing we've heard is, before it looks right, now it doesn't. And that's because we, at the species file group, we do a lot of work migrating legacy data sets into TaxonWorks. And so our users are coming at us with two perspectives: how things used to look, here's the UCD data set, and how they're familiar with interacting with that look and feel for sometimes decades, and how it looks now. When we move data from an old system to a new system, we're really adding a lot of semantics, and we're really improving the modeling. And one of the big opportunities in doing this is that modeling highlights gaps. So the reasons why it might not look the same is because it never actually looked quite right in the past. That's one of the possibilities. One of the red flags that kind of comes up is that when people see a sort of label on the screen, if you think of perhaps a digital extended specimen, it's drawing from many, many different tables and many different models, and they're only seeing a small part of that. And so we really need to communicate to our users that what they see is not necessarily the full underlying meaning of the data. So I'll confess, this is another thing that we've heard, but I'm the person that actually said it. It doesn't matter until it does. And the it here, I mean, and the it in this context is open source applications and all of the goodness that comes along with it, all of the hard work that goes into building those, including things like docs and tests and integrated frameworks. We hear a lot about all of these things on the right side here, and they're all really important. However, if we're starting from a context that doesn't touch that open source basis, I really think we have some red flags. We may have things like vendor lock-in, we may be siloing our software, and we may be sort of forcing our institutional knowledge into something that might not be as open as it needs to be. On the opposite side, if we do have open source software, we really open ourselves up to some amazing contributions, and TaxonWorks has seen that in the last couple of years through a number of student contributions, but also through outside people who have come to us largely completely unexpectedly, that have built important tools that have really made a lot of people's lives a lot better at all different levels of the software stack. Finally, I think we're not unique in hearing that your CMS or your VRE is too complicated. TaxonWorks is too complicated. And this is really a tricky problem. That complexity may come from a whole bunch of different places. How we model our data, how we expose that data in the API, what our user interface looks like and does, and that general user experience of clicking through it and sort of getting frustrated with why things may or may not be consistent, etc. So there's a lot to tease out in hearing something is too complicated. There's sort of two sides to this coin. On the plus side, we really like to hear it from collaborators who have engaged with us, who've learned, they've made decisions, and they've stuck with us even though things are too complicated, because those collaborators are really going to give us some valuable feedback as to how to make it less complicated. And we've got an excellent community helping us in this regard. The flip side of that coin is that when we hear things like TaxonWorks is too complicated, but maybe it's in the context of a meeting or somebody down the hall, and those people haven't really engaged like this first cohort has, we may have some damage control to be focused on, right? Or maybe needing to get the word out in sort of different ways so that we can benefit from a solid understanding of what's really going on. That's all I'd like to say. Of course, all of this is a big output and completely made possible by the Species File Group and all of our collaborators, so a big thanks to them. And I'll end with one more thing that we've heard people say about TaxonWorks. Thanks for your time, and I hope I have time for your questions.
Okay, is it on? Okay, good. Thanks a lot. I think we have plenty of time for discussion. Are there questions from the audience?
So, hi, Matt. Hi, everybody. Co-author, in case for those of you who don't know me. How many of you does your CMS do everything you want it to do for you right now? How many people can raise their hand? Ha, one person. Cool, Jess. All right, you go. So, how many of you have repetitive tasks that you do that are hard, right? That you wish there was another way to do them? How many of you have those? Yes. How many of you can visualize everything you want to visualize in your data, to see patterns in it, to see errors in it? How many of you can do that right now the way you want to do it? Yeah, nobody raised their hand. Exactly. It's hard questions. So this has been part of my happiness, I just want to say, from a TaxonWorks point of view, is being able to bring those sort of conversations to the software development side. When we are trying to build what we do, and Matt's talking about complexity, what we're trying to do is get at this, and Erica said it beautifully, this notion of our CMSs are no longer digital ledgers. We are asking them to do things. And there are more things we could be asking them to do if we. So I'm curious, what are some things you know you'd like your system to do right now? Yes.
Well, currently they need to manage the whole institution from end to end. That's what we're asking them to do. Yeah. We're asking them to take care of our collections, understand what the collections have, but also do the loans, the exhibitions, the acquisitions, the object entries. It's an end-to-end tool. It is quickly and very rapidly becoming the central end-to-end tool for institutions, which is usually done by multiple systems, not one system. I forget.
So for me, coming to this project, it was an opportunity to be able to show some of the things. So when people say TaxonWorks is too complicated, I'm always interested in which part, because what it usually ends up being often is, for example, people that keep their data in spreadsheets. So they can see every field and they can see every column and they can scroll down endlessly to find God knows what row. But the reality is, it doesn't do what it could do for them. When I start asking them, do you have repetitive tasks? Do you have pain points? They always say yes. So the software itself, is it bridging those gaps for us? People-wise, is it giving us the ability for the people to do for us what we'd like to do? I had somebody ask me once, is there software out there and a person I could hire who could do front-end data, like visitor data, donor data, keep track of all the donors, collections management data about the collections, and research data? Can I hire this person? And I was like, and what software do you expect them to use to do that in? So, yeah, I don't know. Matt, do you have questions for people?
I don't think so. Maybe I'll add, can you hear me? I should.
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah. Maybe I'll add one observation. We were interviewing curator candidates here in the past week, and a couple of different interesting topics came up. And one of them was whether or not we're going to converge to sort of one global system, like that's going to kind of do everything. Like, wouldn't it be nice if all the names were in one place and that name problem would just go away, right? And even the AI folks at the plenary know that the name problem's not going away. We need the expertise to do it. So my answer to that was that I don't think we've realized the potential of applications like TaxonWorks, and I hope things that are going to get developed in other fronts, the APIs behind them, right? So I really hope we're engineering our software so that the organizations that have technical expertise can contribute at a sort of spectrum of levels. In TaxonWorks, you can learn how to create a new interface in, I could teach pretty much anybody in 2 days how to create a simple report interface, actually code it out on the simple side. On the complicated side, you're going to be spending a good couple months learning, some of the back end stuff. But the point is that there's a whole spectrum. You can engage the API and write a R wrapper on the data that comes out. You can use the command line and access all of the models there, and you can get all of that on a Docker container. I think once our community starts to understand that a lot of this complexity is there, but there's little hooks into how we can access it. And if we can get our CMSs or our virtual research environments, big or small, to expose via the APIs and teach our people that are using them that, hey, you can get these pieces all, and customize it to your research, right? Always bringing it back to this idea that we're inherently doing research, right? We want to facilitate the process of science, and scientists love figuring out how to connect dots, right? And we're giving them lots of connections, but I don't think we're really communicating that those connections are open for business on many scales. That's my take on, my optimistic take to sort of counter Erica, or to augment Erica's disappointments.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Matt. Another hand from Matt, and then. We do have some time, but I think we will use some time at the end to synthesize if we can. So I'll hand over to Gary for the last talk.
Thanks, Steen. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I'm going to talk briefly about a new position for me and a new role where I sit at the Yale Peabody Museum is as a digitization coordinator and a head of computer systems. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of what it takes when you have people in those interstitial roles, and how you can bridge gaps between communities at your own institution, and then how you can use that to leverage the interoperability of systems as a constellation and a network of systems, rather than trying to make one system do everything. And it's hard, and it takes time, and it takes people. So one of the primary ways in which Yale has been able to do this has been sort of as an institution is reprioritized as a foundational pillar, an organizational structure with governance and people and budgets and real feet on the ground, is to organize cultural heritage as an institutional pillar and priority for the university as a whole. And so cultural heritage comprises one of those primary pillars for the Yale University as a whole. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of what we've been able to accomplish, what we're trying to achieve, and sort of how we're trying to get there, but also highlight the fact that it's hard. Takes a lot of work, takes a lot of people, but the payoff is really quite worth it. So cultural heritage IT at Yale is a network of people. It's an infrastructure that provides central resources for administration, for program management, for actually providing a project manager to be the timekeeper, to be the project manager, to say, all right, we're going to provide the notes and the links and make sure everybody that needs to have access to all of the documents and everything in advance is on top of everything. And so there are the hierarchical structures of how this organization does business, but at the same time, it's also the people that really make it happen. And so by leveraging the economies of scale, by getting everybody together to accomplish similar goals, Yale University has done this by doing it for not only the Yale Peabody Museum, which is our natural history and cultural heritage primary museum, but also for the Yale University Art Gallery and for the university libraries and the archives and an increasing number of galleries, libraries, archives, and museums across the university system by providing this constellation framework for how we can share interoperable systems so that we don't all have to have our own digital asset management system or digital preservation system. So we can all use our different CMS and then provide an interpretation layer of people, systems, and frameworks that allow for them to work together by relying on standards. And so we're doing this by using Darwin Core, as we're all extremely familiar, but also have natively engaged this in IIIF, and then now express that in a knowledge graph and sort of a semantic relationship between each individual concept of people, places, things, ideas, organizations, and using that with a data specification known as linked art. So to go a little bit into that history, I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the infrastructure, the people. So back in 2008 and 2009, I put together an office for digital infrastructure and access. And in so doing, really started to begin that shared digital asset management system for cultural heritage broadly interpreted across the university. And that really set the stage for this model of collaboration and cooperation, and then ultimately helped really to facilitate our commitment to openness and to accessibility of data systems and structures by allowing for the university to sort of roll out a default open access policy. Everything that the university has and holds will be done so in public trust for the good of all. And that's just one of the ways that we're trying to do that. And then we appointed a central person who also sits with a joint appointment in the president's office, and I don't know how she does everything, but Susan really helps to keep all of that together by making sure that people are standing up to the table, joining and making sure that they have the things that they need to contribute to that working relationship actually being able to be accomplished and accountable. So this cultural heritage IT pillar was created in 2017. Project funding is very critical, and so by using that as a central organizational structure within the university sort of business model, really helped to funnel funds from the IT organization into supporting museums, libraries, archives, and galleries as a critical priority of the university. So that collections basis for that infrastructure has really allowed for us to start to find those areas where collaboration and reliance on systems and services and people with real technical expertise to fit those technical needs can be done by a smaller number of people because they're being shared across a broader number of projects, not just for one museum or one particular division within a museum, for example. And then hiring a project manager, a digitization coordinator. These kinds of roles that sit at the intersection of all of the various collecting areas are really what help to put this together and make sure that there is the capability to have a shared metadata scheme, vision, platform, functional requirements, and how you can start to build new products and services. COVID really offered a new opportunity to take some of those endeavors and to really dive in with virtual collaboration and to eliminate some barriers of space and time and how people can get across campus. And just working remotely has really enabled some of those activities and really allowed for us to build a linked open data infrastructure that we call LUX. This allows us to shine light onto all of the aspects of our collections across the entire university ecosystem. And so by contributing metadata not only to GBIF via Darwin Core Archives and RIPT, we're also vending data to this project architecture LUX. So that way our data is seen alongside everything that you see from the art galleries and the libraries and all of our archival finding aids for all of the materials that we have in our archives are eventually going to be able to be put into this one-stop shop for the entire university. And it's been a wild ride. The last year or so, LUX was launched to the public. There are now more than 100 organizations that are looking at our open source code base to be able to use this platform to help to expose data in a linked open and useful data framework. And so we're really starting to grapple with questions of what comes next. How do we let data aggregators, search engines, how do we let artificial intelligence and bots scrape data, pull information, index our results in their searches, and what that looks like to allow for feedback about how questions of data quality are originated within the Peabody Museum are helped by that relationship with folks across the university or between institutions so that we can leverage those Wikidata identifiers and those Q numbers that say, oh, this person really is this one of 4 George Proctors that we know about, and that this person has done these things and didn't collect that thing and accession it 25 years before their birth. And so we're really looking forward to how we can use that collections portal and back end, and the Peabody Museum in particular will be taking that slice of Lux data and using that infrastructure as a service kind of model to build a new front end to our own collections management system for how people interact with Peabody Museum data. So there's lots of partners and lots of ways in which this has come together across the university. But this is just one of the projects that allow for us to collaborate and what happens when we work together. So we're building shared infrastructure, physical infrastructure, warehouses for oversized objects, building location management and trying to understand how we can share space, and then even starting to look at environmental monitoring and relationships and how we build out this infrastructure for people that think about rights and bias awareness and responsibility data and the real critical problems come out of the data and metadata themselves, not just for one institution, but how that looks in a broader context for the good of the public at large. And so that has really, I'm going to stress this again, has been able to be organized by rigorous project management and community norms for that effective collaboration. And so those community norms are things that I also really want to stress is something that when we have steering committee meetings, each individual gallery, library, archive, and museum is present, has a voting member. There are some non-voting members too, but everyone has a voice at the table and is able to contribute to the conversation about the needs of the entire collective as a whole and how we can work together to move that along with both the resources of an individual organization and then those beyond that. Lux has been that major critical product, and so as you can see from this very outdated screenshot now, we've got lots of things that are represented in the knowledge graph for how we are aggregating all of the information across Yale's collections into a one-stop shop. I'm going to give a live demo on this tomorrow in the demo camp, and I'll talk a little bit more about sort of how we leverage everything into this Lux architecture from our collections management system in a session tomorrow morning as well in the Spinach to Tadwig symposium. But also now that we're starting to think about things and contributing data to a sort of a higher power than ourselves and looking at that sort of facilitated environment for cross collections discovery, we're now also starting to be able to engage new stakeholders. By vending exhibit information, we can now, as a university natural history museum, start to think about what it means to engage with alumni, because the Peabody Museum doesn't have alums. We don't have a donor base. We don't have the same kind of relationships that many other institutions may have. And so by referencing that fossil that was hanging on the wall in your residential college when you were a student 35 years ago, where is it now? Where has it been? How many people have seen that? Or is it back in the vault? No one can see it again. We're really starting to think about ways in which people can engage with collections in use cases far broader than just research collections and people that are able to physically visit as our museum galleries and spaces. And making sure that we can vend provenance data, information about how we got the metadata that tell us the story of the fitness for use for that research object, and then really starting to build that out into that constellation of further environments where those data can be seen. And then lastly, one thing that I'll try to leave you with is this is an iterative process, and we've really started to look at how new things can come together. And by part of this collaboration, we're now starting to look at how environmental data and put together an environmental report card can be put on individual specimens. So the physical storage infrastructure where those objects live, we're recording temperature, humidity, and light levels and aggregating that across all of the museums. So we now have a decision support infrastructure for physical care of the objects because of that collaboration across the units. So with that, I'll end and encourage people to ask questions in the Google Doc or here in person. Thank you all.
Questions?
Thank you. Hello. So I work at GBIF. My name is Marie. Hi. You mentioned sharing from CMS to data aggregators. I was wondering, first, I know other CMS share to GBIF, but I know there are other aggregators out there, and so I wanted to know a little bit what's the landscape of where you want to share data and what kind of data. and also if there's anything data aggregators can do to help CMS development. Sorry, it's for you, Gary, but also for other people in the room if they want to, share. Thanks.
Human-centered design is a very specific way of looking at things, and knowing your audience is really one of the first questions that we ask about how those data are to be represented by the consumers of those data. So one of the things that I think that aggregators can do to sort of start to say this is help to let a new data provider understand in what circumstances those data can be consumed by both traditional and new audiences, and where the value adds can be by looking at an individual data contributor's data model in a broader environment and constellation, because the enrichments that happen for the data themselves are also sort of augmented by the relationships of the people that we start to know about the people that have the same problems, that have different solutions, and then we're all in the same boat, and that we need to work together. Thanks, Marie.
Fantastic. Any last question?
There's been a lot of activity in the Google Doc as well.
There's been, yeah, not banter, but backwards and forwards on the Google Doc. Keep it up on the Google Doc. I will keep it open. I will keep looking at the questions, and we can continue the chat there. First of all, before closing, I'd like to thank all the presenters for contributing. That was amazing. And I think there's the possibility of an ongoing topic year on year that brings up and follows on of what's happened, what the providers are doing, what the challenges are in that space. So I think there's hopefully real benefit to everyone, not just the suppliers, not just the institutions, not just the community, but looking at that clarity of information, what we agree on, what we don't agree on, how many emotions we have, it's important, how many emotions we don't have as well. So I think from my perspective, I'm happy as can be. I'm done now. There's a break now. So I think with that, we can, there's still a 1 minute left. So if anybody wants to storm out or shout, that's absolutely fine. If not, I'll say thank you very much again, and keep the chat up. I think we're all here. So the presenters, everybody's willing to chat about anything they've said, not said, anything that other people said. So thank you very much.